Welcome to Wisdom Talk Radio, a collaborative community of explorers in conscious living.
Do you think that life is what happens to you? What if life happens for you instead? How would knowing that in your cells change the way that you live your life? What would be different? My guest today, Sam Liebowitz, is a dear friend, colleague, and has a lot to say about waking up to new possibilities. In fact, his new book is all about that. Stay tuned. I'm Laurie Seymour, host of Wisdom Talk Radio and CEO and founder of the Baca Institute. Head there to discover your creative advantage by taking the Creative Innovator quiz. Find out your personal creative innovator style so that you can open your creative flow and make everything in life easier. Learn to optimize your ability to create more in less time while enjoying every minute. Sam Liebowitz, known as the Conscious Consultant, is a mentor, coach, speaker, healer, serial entrepreneur, and author of the #1 new best-selling book, Everyday Awakening. He has been in business since 1993 and has owned several successful businesses. His current ventures include Talking Alternative Broadcasting and Double Diamond Wellness, both in Manhattan. Sam has lectured in several venues in New York City, including being a featured speaker at TEDxUpperWestSide in 2016. Welcome, Sam. I am so excited to have you on the show. We have been playing together and doing things for a while now, and it's the first time you've been on Wisdom Talk Radio.
Yes, thank you so much, Laurie. I really appreciate you having me on your show. I've been looking forward to this ever since we first talked about it.
Yeah, which was a while back.
Which was a while ago, yeah.
So I guess I have to start with asking you, what do you mean by life happens for you?
Well, the phrase, I first heard it said that way from our dear friend Jennifer Huff.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
A couple of years ago when I was down in Asheville for a weekend training with her.
Mm-hmm.
And when she said it, it just resonated with my whole body. It was like something I already knew and believed in, but just hadn't put it quite that way. Yeah. And what it was the recognition that the things we consider to be our biggest struggles and sometimes our greatest pains actually all serve us in some way. We just usually don't see it in the moment or when we're in the midst of it. And it's just that when we can pull back the perspective a little bit and take a broader, wider view, when we understand that actually all of life happens for us, it's always supporting us. Now, it's not necessarily supporting us in the way we, quote unquote, want to be supported, but it's supporting us for our highest good, our growth, for who we're meant to be in this life. I'm a big believer, everything is actually perfect. And so
that's a big distinction, isn't it, Sam?
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, because people get very attached to what they want for themselves in life. And a lot of people would be kicking and screaming to say, I don't want to learn anything new, or I don't want to learn from life. I just want to be happy.
Right. Right. And it's kind of like when we get in our comfort zones and we're kind of happy and we're comfortable where we are, the momentum is to kind of stay there. Mm-hmm. So it takes some kind of external force in a way to kind of push us out of it. that in most cases it's because we're in so much pain we can't afford to stay in it anymore because it just hurts too much. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's when there's such a big pull, like the more evolved I feel we get, the pull is more toward it's not the push from the pain, but it's a pull towards going to something even greater and juicier, and oh, that just feels so good.
Mm-hmm.
But for most of us, it's really the push from the pain that gets us out of our comfort zone that
Yeah.
then causes us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
There's the old analogy about how if you look at life, if you look at a caterpillar, if you look at a, a, um, a lobster or a crab, in order for the shell to grow, sometimes they have to shed, like a snail will shed its old shell and find a new shell to grow. And it's actually painful and quite dangerous when they're without their shell.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many creatures in nature where it's painful to grow. It's uncomfortable. A snake, every month it sheds its skin. And it's actually very uncomfortable, but completely necessary in order for the snake to grow.
I think about what you just said about the snail and how vulnerable a snail is when it's in the
Right.
midst of letting go of the shell. And
Mm,
for most of us, we don't like feeling vulnerable. We
right.
mistake vulnerability for weakness.
Right. Whereas the truth is, when we can authentically be vulnerable in front of other people, that actually shows our strength more than anything else.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. But what about vulnerability just simply with yourself? I mean, the thought of the snail, he's not demonstrating that he's being vulnerable. He just, in order to get where he needs to go, he's got to become vulnerable. He's got to be willing to let go of what was in order to move into what's possible.
Absolutely. It always starts with us first,
Mhm.
right? To be vulnerable with other people, we have to be honest and vulnerable with ourselves. To learn to be kinder and gentler with other people, we first have to be kinder and gentler with ourselves.
Big
To
one.
be, to truly respect other people, we have to respect ourselves first. It all starts with us. To have good boundaries with people, we first have to have good boundaries with ourselves. We usually step over our own boundaries way more than other people do.
Can you give me an example of that, of how that is for you or how that has been at some point in your life?
Well, come on, we've all done it. We've all said, oh, yeah, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and start exercising. And
Mhm.
then something happens tonight, or you have a bad sleep that night, and you get up and you're just too tired and exhausted. And you're like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow.
Mhm.
Right. Whenever we say to ourselves, oh, I'll do it later, I'll do it tomorrow, that's crossing our boundary. We said, yes, I
Ah.
want to do this. I'm going to do this. And then when we don't, we've just walked all over a boundary we set.
Mhm. Okay.
Or
Okay.
even like, let's say we have somebody in our life who's toxic in some way, and we say, I'm not, letting them take any more of my time, or I'm not answering their emails or phone calls anymore. And then we get that one message like, oh, I'm so desperate, I really need your help, please, please, please. And we just feel, so sorry for them that we then take that message, and then it's the same old thing, and we're like, oh, why did I take this message?
Mhm. Didn't I learn?
Right.
Right. Right. So, for you, you've just written this great book, and it is, excuse me, it is a great book. I have just been so enjoying reading it, often
Oh,
before I go to bed at night,
oh, nice.
especially because there's little nuggets like everywhere in your book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, actually, I been writing. Technically, I've been writing the book over the last 6 years,
Right.
because it's a compilation of all my blog writings, not all, but the best of my blog writings from the last 6 years.
Hmm.
But when I started writing, I'd never intention of creating a book from what I was writing. It was just, I needed content for my newsletter. And I love Seth Godin. I've been following Seth Godin for years, and he just talked about showing up, and he always encourages people just show up every single day. I mean, he like writes a blog every single
Mhm,
day.
mhm.
And I was like, let me just start with once a week, okay, or twice a week. That I can handle. Every day might be a little bit much for me.
Yeah.
And so and then I used it as basically an opportunity to be present to what's going on for me in my life. And I didn't make it personal. Like, I didn't tell the story of what happened to me, but I would just make it a perspective of what did I learn from what was
Mhm,
going on.
mhm,
So, did I experience some loss? Did I get triggered over some conversation? Did I hear someone say something amazing, like life happens for you, not to you?
mhm,
And then they would be like, oh, okay. And then I'd just start typing, and the words would just come out.
mhm.
And especially over the last 2 or 3 years, I've had several people say, oh, this was like the perfect blog post. I really needed to hear this today. Or, oh, these are really great. And then I had this one friend who lives in the building next to me, who's a PR person. And she's like, these are great. You got to get these published. You got to get these published. And for like 2 years, she's been after me to like get them together and publish a book. So I
So
finally
there
did.
we go. Everyday Awakening came into being.
Yes, it came into being.
So it really is, the book really is a window into you, really, a window into the your own growth, your own evolution, the things that were without, as you said, telling not having to go into the raw details.
Right.
And a lot of blog writing has been that, just
Mhm.
here's, let's rip open the kimono without having gotten to the what did I learn from that place?
Right.
And
Right.
and that's the place where we're not just being voyeurs to somebody else's process, but we're getting to see how it got integrated and has come out the other end. You've come out the other side of it, and here's what I've learned from this.
Right. And I really want people to know, it's like, I'm not perfect. Like, I don't necessarily live up to all these things every single day, but it's just part of the way I see things. And so, and it's funny
Mm,
because now that the book is out and became a #1 bestseller, and people are interviewing me and I'm talking about the book. And,
mhm,
I like to say, like, the book is not designed to necessarily, it can be, but not necessarily to be read linearly. It's more like you randomly flip open to a page and it's like, there's a message for you today. I just flipped
mhm,
open to, if we take responsibility for our part, we can change our life. And it's like, I remember I
mhm.
was doing this on one show and I was reading through them like, oh, wow, like this is pretty good. Oh, wow. It's like, yeah, that really resonates, the reminder of it. And it's like, yeah,
Yes.
I wrote all these, but I mean, it's 126. I mean, it's a substantial book, but everything
Mhm.
is just 1 or 2 pages long. So it's easy to just flip open to a page, read 2 pages, takes you 5 minutes, close it, put it down, and let it settle in.
Yes, that's an important piece. I remember when I was writing weekly, I always ended my each blog post with a kind of reminder of, take a deep breath, let this settle, sit with this, just let it marinate within you.
Mm.
And that's what I hear you asking people to do with each of these. So it's not
Yeah.
hey, how many of these can I read in one sitting,
Yeah.
but how
No.
much can I really take of this wisdom?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I would say you're probably better served to only read one in a sitting
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then let it sit with you, see how it feels, and then go on to the next one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then again, randomly flip open to a page or don't, or just maybe there's a chapter of like, oh yeah, I want to really read about those. And so maybe you
Mhm.
focus on a chapter for a while. But I don't know. I kind of like the randomness of it. It's kind of like an oracle deck in book format.
That's true. That's true. Maybe that's next.
Maybe.
Maybe you just named
Well,
your next product.
yeah. Well, I don't know. Everyone's been telling me they want to hear it in my voice. So I think the audiobook is next.
Ah, okay.
But
Okay. Yes.
yeah, we'll see. But maybe the card deck will come sometime next year. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know how expensive it is to make a card deck.
Well, you need the right visual person.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So you are your moniker. I've never used that word, but your moniker is the conscious consultant.
Hmm.
What does that mean, and how did you get there, wherever there is?
Well, it's kind of funny because I never intended to become a healer or an energy worker. I never thought I had it in me. But many years ago, I like to say the universe will have its way with you, whether you want it to or not.
Oh my goodness, yes. Sometime we'll
So,
have to tell stories about that one.
yeah. So, a long, long time ago, when I was in college, I was put on a very spiritual path, but it went haywire, it went crazy. And after a number of years, I just had to walk away from the whole thing because it was just for my own sanity. I had to extricate myself from it. And so much of my identity was tied up with what was going on and what I believed. And after that, I didn't know what to believe and I didn't know what to do. So I was kind of drifting for a long time. That's when I became an entrepreneur and just focused on making money because that was just something tangible to kind of ground me. And then probably about a little more than 15 years ago, first it was, oh, I found some old recordings of Tony Robbins and I shared it with my wife and she loved it. You know, she's a therapist, and started getting back into personal development. And then because of getting back into the personal development, started going to this local meetup group called the New York Power Team. And they would have like somebody come in and do a presentation about something that could help you. And inevitably they would talk about some modality, something like NLP or the Sedona method or Brandon Bay's The Journey. And then in the weekend, they'd be giving the whole workshop. So I would go to these meetings and be, oh my God, this is amazing. I never heard anything like this before. And I go to my wife, oh, they're doing a workshop this weekend. You want to come? And she'd be like, okay. And so we go and like learn all this stuff. And so I was going and going for my own healing. Not I ever intended to like use this stuff, but just for my own healing. But then, sure enough, comes that one workshop that, you know, they teach you some process and they pair you up. And I helped this woman release a condition that she said she had had since she was 6 years old.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, 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 like the light bulb went off. Like, oh, like this isn't just for me. I can use this to help other people. And I'm like, what do I do with this? I'm an entrepreneur. What do I do with this? And so I was, you know, kind of sitting with it and thinking about it. And I'm like, well, I'm a business consultant. You know, I help people with starting their own businesses. I coach and mentor people. I guess I'm still kind of a consultant. I'm just a different kind of consultant now because now I take a broader view. Now I understand the importance of the energy and the underlying awareness around things. So that's when this idea of the conscious consultant was born, is that I still have my foot very strongly in the business world, but now I'm bringing a different perspective, a different awareness, a different consciousness to it, so that that's the way I work with people. I work with them holistically to shift the underlying energetic patterns or to shift their consciousness around something, thereby not just shifting what's going on in their business or their career, but in their life in general.
Wow. And seeing that they're not exactly separate, are they?
Not at all. Not at all. They're all the same thing. It's the same way we think that like our emotional health and our physical health and our mental health and our spiritual health are like four separate things. No, they're all different aspects of the exact same thing. When we're healthy emotionally, we're healthy spiritually, we're healthy mentally, we're healthy physically, and vice versa. It's all interrelated.
So we can enter at any one of those points, and as a facilitator, as a teacher, as a guide, mentor, whatever words we want to use or titles we want to use, whatever place we enter in, we're really impacting the whole.
My shamanic teacher has a medicine wheel. It's his own kind of creation, but based on, informed by many different traditions. And he's a lineage holder himself. But on the medicine wheel, we look at mind, heart, body, and spirit, and the four archetypal directions, and a whole bunch of stuff that goes along with it. And in ceremony, we sort of work on, going in one of those directions. But he says, and I've experienced it myself, from any point in the wheel, you can get to every other point in the wheel. So
Mm.
from heart, you can get to mind, spirit, or body.
Mm-hmm.
From body, you can get to heart, spirit, or mind.
Mm-hmm.
From spirit, you can get to mind, heart, or body. So yeah, they're all interrelated, and we can go anywhere from any one of them to the other.
Uh-huh.
It's not about balance. A lot of people talk about being more balanced. It's not about balance. It's about harmony and fluidity. When we're
Mm-hmm.
okay with all the different aspects, and we understand when to flow to the right aspect at the appropriate time and when not to, then we just go where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
When we're having a conversation with a friend or we're connecting with people in community, it's about heart. But if we're working on a business plan, it's about numbers, it's mind. You don't want to be in your heart when you're, you want to be in your mind. When you're sitting down and meditating, you don't want to be all emotional, or you don't want to be up in your head. You want to be with spirit. You want that inspiration to come.
Mm-hmm.
When you're being physical, you want to be present. That's being embodied. You don't want to be out in spirit when you're trying to exercise or do physical labor. So they all serve a purpose, and there are always appropriate times to use one or a combination of them. So it's not that we're always balanced with all four. It's just we learn how to dance with each of the four of them.
Well, Sam, I'm thinking about that as I'm listening. I agree, it's not about balance. And I also see how there's no way to really separate those into four things, four ways of being. Um, when I am doing mental work, when I am, thinking about my budget and what I need to do with that, whether it's in my business or my personal life, I'm also tapping into guidance, into that spiritual side of things, if you will, and saying, okay, well, how do I need to move with this? How am I needing to address that? What's most important here? I'm asking all of those questions of um, that field of creative intelligence, so that I'm not just there with any one particular thing. And I have a feeling you would agree with me on that, but
Yeah,
tell me.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and yeah, they're not four separate ways of being, but they're four different filters with which to view where we are.
Ooh, that's lovely.
Yeah. And it's
Mm.
kind of, one of the things my teacher says, he's so brilliant in so many ways. He says the problem in the West is that we think we have one ego and we're very attached to it. Whereas the truth is, we have many facets, many masks,
Mhm.
and they're appropriate for different situations. We show up for our family different than we show up for our friends, different than we show up for our colleagues, different than we show up for our bosses or our subordinates, different than we show up for a volunteer, different than we show up in different ways. And it's all us. It's just about not being so attached to one way of being, because all those ways of our being are us.
Mhm. Mhm. That's beautiful. Not being so attached to any one way of being. And then when the universe, I'm just realizing that when the universe comes along and invites us, whether it's a push or a pull,
Or a kick.
or a kick, yeah, or one of those cosmic 2x4s,
Yeah.
um, invites us into that next stage. It how we respond to that really reflects on, well, was I attached, or was I not attached? What am I willing to be in this harmony and flow?
And the attachment doesn't have to be to something physical. It could
Right.
just be attached to the way we see life, or the way
Mhm.
what we believe in, and what we think of as good or bad, or good and evil, things like that.
Mhm.
And sometimes we get an awakening that what we believed in or what we thought was true our whole life, we might all of a sudden change our perspective and change our belief that maybe it wasn't so true, or maybe we didn't have all the facts, or we didn't know everything that
Mhm.
was going
Mhm.
on. And one of the funniest thing is that when we're little kids, the things that we experience, we make stories about.
Hmm.
And we think the story is so true because the actual physical things that happen, the facts are true. But the interpretation, we get so attached to it. And usually the interpretation is way off. And one of the things that I've discovered for myself and that I work with other people to see is that our perspective of what another person was feeling or thinking and why their motivation and why they did what they did is usually not what we interpreted it at all, because we're not really seeing them as their own individual human being. We're seeing them as a mother or a father or a sister or a brother or a friend, and not
Hmm.
as a human being. And it could be years. We could be living with this story our whole lives. And then all of a sudden we find out that the person didn't do what we saw them do because we thought they were trying to do something against us, but actually they were doing it because they cared so much about us, or they were so
Hmm.
proud of us, or whatever, so many different things. And then also it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And I've been living with this my whole life.
Yeah. There were some situations like that between my daughter and I,
Hmm.
where we uh, we really went through some rocky times and had to come into those places, or came into those places, each of us in our own way, of seeing, oh, wait a minute, what I saw, what I thought I saw, wasn't the case at all. And it totally shifted our relationship in an incredible way.
Yeah. I mean, with my mom passed away last year at 99 and a half. And I was fortunate in that, like, we kind of knew, at that age, you kind of know she doesn't have too much
Right.
longer to go, but though her health was relatively good. But I remember I was making a trip to see her a couple of months before she transitioned, before she graduated.
Hmm.
And I knew it might be the last time I see her alive.
Mm.
And so I went in ceremony around it. And in ceremony, I was able to, for the first time in my life, to really see her as a human being, not as a mother.
Mhm.
And to see my dad, who passed away many, many years ago, also as a human being, not as a father.
Mhm.
And it's so shifted how I felt about my mom that the last time I saw her, I was really able to express to her so much appreciation, really, and even being apologetic for sort of my side of things
Right.
in a way, which wasn't necessarily necessary, but it felt good to me to do it. That and she didn't say anything. She just smiled and nodded. That's all she did.
Wow.
But I knew, it's kind of like,
Mhm.
and then, like 2 months later, she was gone. And I was so fortunate that I was able to do that
Mhm.
with her when she was still here.
Yes, yes. Oh, how wonderful. Wow. S- You mentioned being in ceremony. You went into
Hmm.
ceremony about it. Tell us about that.
So this is the shamanic work that I've been engaged in for the last 6.5 years, which I've recently graduated.
Yes, congratulations.
Yes. Lots of things to celebrate the end of this
Really.
year. Um, and it's been so impactful on my life. It really has. And I've studied many spiritual traditions before, but this really kind of grounded a lot of the lessons, but also helped me to see myself more clearly.
Hmm.
And my teacher, who is a lineage holder from Peru, he came to the United States like 45 years ago and tried to work with people using these indigenous traditions at a time when people were too busy partying and having a good time. So
Mhm.
he's like, okay, I got to go back and like figure out how I can reach people. And he went back and he literally got like 2 PhDs,
Mm.
came back to the States and created a form of the work that's much more approachable to us as Westerners.
Mm.
And so it's in doing, when I say in ceremony, so we still, it's very modernized. It's very, it's something like you get together, you do a ceremony over a weekend, and you can still go back to work Monday morning. You don't have to be on a special diet. You don't have to, spend weeks at a time in the jungle. It's something we could fit into our life. And it's about, again, the different points in the medicine wheel: heart, mind, body, and spirit. And what I learned is actually 90% of our work is just feeling safe enough to be in our heart space again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's really, and once you're safe with that, then like the rest is not a piece of cake, but the rest is not as difficult as we like to think.
Yeah.
And so it's really informed a lot of my growth. It's really helped give me a more empowered perspective of life itself and of myself in my life. And that I say to people, it's like, if you look at my life today from what it was like 6.5 years ago, externally, it might not look that different. Well, a little bit different. Now I'm a best-selling author and, and some other things going on, but
the trappings have gotten increased.
yeah, but that's not the big thing. The big change is how I feel in my body.
Yeah.
Just how I feel about my life has changed so much.
How has it changed, Sam?
I'm not as angry as I once was. I'm more accepting of my own flaws or my own humanness. And I'm much more accepting of other people as they are, much less judgmental. And a lot of that, people, if I said that to my good friends at the time, they would like never know what I was talking about. They're like, you're not judgmental. But, they're the judgments that we hide that we don't necessarily tell other people.
Right.
Because we're judging ourselves.
Exactly.
And when we stop judging ourselves, suddenly those judgments of others start going away.
Yeah.
And it's the understanding, and not just the understanding, but the embodiment that we really do create our life. We create our life every single day through the choices we make, the attitudes we hold on to, the energy we bring into life, and our environment around us. So we may not have a choice over the external stuff, right? The world is the world. Nobody had a choice as to whether COVID was going to spread around the world or not. But we have 100% choice how we decide to respond to it. And that's where the real power is. And that's one of the reasons why I just want to get my book out into so many hands as possible, because that's one of the core themes that's over and over again is brought up in the book in different ways, is we are more powerful than we know. And I just feel that message is one that people want to hear now more than ever before.
Yeah. And I feel like even though many of our listeners will understand what you mean by we're more powerful, I feel like I still need to ask you about that. I ask you to just expand on that some, because you're not really talking about power in the way that power has come through in the old paradigms.
Absolutely not. No. The real power is in our presence. To really be present to a situation, to not resist what is, to not put our own labels on it, to not put our own interpretation on it, but to see things and see people how they really are and how things really are. That is so much more powerful than we realize. The thing is, we're usually not very present because we're running around these stories in our mind about our past or our future or what's going on, or why is this person doing that, and why is that person doing this, and why did I do this? And so all these stories, these mechanisms, these programs running around inside our conscious and subconscious take us out of presence, usually because of trauma, usually because we haven't really processed a lot. But the more we process our trauma, the more we process our pain, our guilt, our suffering, we can now be more present to what really is, and the beauty of it, and the joy in it, and the juiciness of life. Life is so juicy in so many ways, but we're not really being present to it because we're so focused on what we don't have, or the way things are that aren't the way we want them to be.
Yeah.
That's where our real power is. And presence, when you're more present in a conversation than the other person, you have much more power.
Mhm.
When you are with a group of people and you're more present than anyone else in the group, you have more power because you sense and you feel and you notice who's a little anxious, who's falling asleep, who's upset, who's maybe nervous, who's getting anxious. So then you know how to respond to people and meet them where they're at and help them to settle down, to then help them to be more present to what's really going on in that moment.
Wow.
Because all of life is lived in the present moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If we're not present to that, we're not present to anything.
Yeah. And presence in that way is also presence. I mean capital P presence,
Yes.
that we allow presence, God, spirit, energy, whatever you want to call that, to come through and be available with us and through us. And so there's no power over.
And with that comes many presents.
Ah. It does indeed. It does indeed. And I'm thinking so much these days about the kinds of things that are happening globally, and the challenges, um, the arrogances. That's not a word I generally use, but the arrogances of power in that old paradigm. And then we never get to what's possible. We never get to solutions.
It's so interesting. I mean, if we can take the personal tragedies out of it,
Mm-hmm.
we are living in some of the most interesting times in the world.
Mm.
And I say that because we are like on the cusp of so many global changes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them for the better, some of them not necessarily so, but it's always possible to shift it around. The thing is, it's very messy when you're going through a change of an
Mm-hmm.
epoch, which is
Yeah.
what we're going through. We're
Right.
literally in
Mm.
that period of time between two epochs, from the epoch of Pisces to the epoch of Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
And these change are these epochs change once every 2,600 years.
Right. So it doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't happen overnight. It probably happens over 100 years or
Exactly.
more.
Or more.
But I think we're like right in the middle of it right now.
It feels that way. It really
Yeah.
does feel that way. When I step back from, the day-to-dayness of, I want to be able to go see my friends, or whatever the current moment may be, I feel like this is why I'm here. This is why I've been trained in the way I've been trained. And I mean that in the very biggest sense of the word. And it's also why those of us are gathering in the ways that we're doing.
I mean, just think about it, Laurie. You and I had an opportunity to facilitate a deep dive for the Evolutionary Business Council
Mm-hmm.
that, if it wasn't for everything going on, we probably never would have had that opportunity.
That is true.
And
And
it
it
was
was,
such a beautiful experience. And everybody who was there is raving about that experience.
yeah. And it's never happened before.
And it's never happened before. We created it. We had very little time to put it together. And my original idea didn't sit well with you. And then you had different ideas, and we were back and forth. And then, finally we hit upon it. And I mean, just so much of it was informed by what both of us have gone through in the
Mm-hmm.
last 6 to 9 months,
Mm-hmm.
that we birthed something new that I think can really, and by all indications, where people are saying, like, really can serve people and help people in such a beautiful way that otherwise probably never would have happened in different
Yeah.
circumstances.
So there we have the diamond, that under pressure, Because folks, listen, we were under a bit of pressure to come up with an idea, have it run past the board, get marketing out, get all the details in place in a mere couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and get a team in place to do it, and get people signed up.
Yeah.
And and it was so well received. So,
Yeah.
the piece of how containment, how the so-called pressure of external situations, if when it's up to us, up to us, each of us individually, we have the choice as to how we're going to respond to that. And that was a point you made earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I like to say, we have no control. Any control we think we have over the external world is pure illusion.
Right.
But we have 100% control over what goes on inside of us,
Mhm.
over our choices, our decisions, how we decide to see things. Do we see it as something that serves us, or do we see it as something that diminishes us?
Yeah.
Almost anything we can find a way. If you know if we say something is some way, we're right. If we say it's a different way, we're also right.
Mhm. So
And
it's
we
not
can
about being right or wrong.
Not at all. Not at all. It's what are we choosing to take from the situation?
Yeah.
And if we choose to take from it that life is showing us how strong we are, how good we are, how supported we are, how powerful we are, how
Mhm.
impactful we can be, how much people care about. If we choose to take that, then that's what we have. Then we're more empowered to show up more present, more powerful, more impactful.
And we get to discover parts of ourselves that we never even knew existed.
Absolutely.
Those are
Absolutely.
some of the gifts,
Yes.
the
Yes.
presence.
Presence.
Yeah, I'm moved by what you're sharing, Sam. It's not like it's, um, oh my God, this is new, this is brand new. And there's a way that you have brought it all together, that it resides within you in such a way that that it just emanates from you.
Mm,
Yeah.
Thank you. I like to say I'm a nice Jewish boy from the Bronx.
Yeah, and I'm a
You know,
good Jewish girl from the Philly.
yeah, there you go. I like things simple. I
Mm,
don't like to overcomplicate things. And sometimes the most elegant truths are the simplest ones.
mhm.
And I just like to make things approachable. Some of the stuff I talk about in the book is really based on some very esoteric spiritual philosophies.
Mhm.
But if I use those same words and terminology and talk about it the way a lot of other people do, it won't be accessible to a lot of people.
Exactly. Exactly.
But if I keep my language simple, if I keep it grounded to something that anybody can relate to, then it's much more accessible. Then people can really not only get the lesson for themselves, but actually embody it and apply it in their own day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And if we can apply all of these things that we're learning, then what good are they? It's mental masturbation. It's really
Mhm.
not doing us any good. But
Right.
when we can apply something, when we can
Mhm.
embody it, when we can use it to shift and change our life, then it's gold. Then it's more precious than any of the
Yeah.
diamonds out there.
I love that, Sam. My teacher used to say, if we can't speak to the garbage collector, then we have nothing to say.
Or someone in third grade.
Mhm. Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if we're using such fancy language, why are we doing it?
Right.
Do we
What is
have
it
to
we're
use
trying to
it to make
prove?
ourselves sound so good?
Mhm.
Then why do we need to use fancy language to make ourselves sound so good? Then it's something more about us and not really about being in service.
Yeah.
There are always, if we're open to the idea and we're willing to be honest and truthful with ourselves, there are always things in which we can learn more about ourselves that we can then improve, but then we understand other people as well. One of the
Mhm.
big themes in the book as well is that, like, our deepest wound is our greatest gift.
Mm.
One of the reasons why is because that's how we become relatable to other people and how we can relate to other people.
Yeah.
the better we understand our wounds, the better we understand our pain, our agonies, the better able we are to empathize and understand and support other people who also have the same wounds and agonies and pains.
Yeah. And like Leonard Cohen said, the cracks are where the light gets in.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sam, thank you so very much. I want to ask you to let people know how they can get a hold of you, because you're doing so many different things, and of course, how they can get a hold of Everyday Awakening, which will certainly be in the show notes. But if you could also speak to that right now.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Laurie. Just whenever we get together and chat, I just always have such a good time.
Me too.
You can find me at my website. It's called theconsciousconsultant.com. The 3 words, theconsciousconsultant.com, just all strung together. And you can find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, all over the place. I'm fairly visible if you just search for me. And if you want to get the book, it's on all the major booksellers, Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, Indie Books, all those places. But I did create a link that'll take you right to the listing on Amazon, which is everydayawakeningbook.com.
And that will be in the show notes.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sam, thank you. And you mentioned the deep dive that we did, and we're going to do it again for this year in 2021.
Yes.
I don't know when this is going to air, but whenever it does, it's going when we do that, it's going to be in 2021. So we'll be talking about that again too.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today.
My pleasure, Laurie. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
And thank you for being with us today at Wisdom Talk Radio. Join us here regularly for more wisdom, discovery, and illumination. Remember, you can find us on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. And if you've enjoyed listening to us today, leave us a review because that helps more people to access the wisdom and to transform the world. And for more about fast tracking your ideas to creation and revenue, find me, Laurie Seymour, over at thebacainstitute.com. And that's BACA, thebacainstitute.com. And remember, there's that great quiz over there to find out your creative innovator style.
Thanks for joining us here at Wisdom Talk Radio. We wish you well in your conscious explorations. For more information and to join in the conversation, our website is wisdomtalkradio.com or at Wisdom Talk Radio on Facebook.